I'm Marjorie Brook from Brook Seminars Bodywork Education, and I wanted to share some experiences that I've had working with scars and scar tissue. A lot of times there's been a big debate now about, we used to always say as massage therapists and physical therapists that the issue is in the tissue and that we store memories and experiences in the cells of our tissue, and now there's a lot of rebuttal for that now, saying that that doesn't happen. But I'm kind of here to just, not say one way or the other than share the experiences of things that happen, for example, in classes with our demos alone. We were in a scar tissue release class for the straight method, and we had a woman volunteer who had a 15-year-old C-section scar. Wasn't even that much of a scar, but she volunteered. Wasn't very visible on the surface, but she did have some deep down underlying adhesions. And as we started to work on her, she started saying that it felt like I was driving a railroad spike through her back. Now, I was working on her abdomen, right above the C-section scar. And as the treatment went on, she continued to say it felt like I was constantly poking her and ramming her with a railroad spike. And then she goes, the area was also feeling numb. About 2 minutes later into the session, she turns around and says, well, it actually was an emergency C-section, and before they did the emergency C-section, they had actually given me an epidural, and they messed up, and they temporarily paralyzed me. Wow, epidural, railroad spike, jammed into her back. Anybody see the connection there? So we then explained, we thanked her for sharing and said it would have been nice to tell us about the emergency part of the C-section prior to the demo. And this is another little hint there, because no matter how many times you ask your client to write out their medical history, you still need to ask extra questions, because they tend to leave bits and pieces out, either from forgetting it or not wanting to remember it. Anyway, moving forward with the scar tissue. As we continued to work on her, her mood changed completely. She was getting very angry and very upset and frustrated. We asked if she wanted to be done with the demo, and she said no, it's okay. But she went on and on to tell us how she had went to the doctor prior and yelled at the doctors and told them that they needed to take the baby out 2 weeks prior to everything happening. She knew the baby was too big and no one would listen to her. And she was getting a little bit more angry, and everything, news stories were coming up. And we explained during the class that this is all being brought up. Why? Because I did a couple of scar tissue release moves over her C-section scar that was what? 15 years old. Now, the other thing that we pointed out in the class is that she never really dealt with the fact that the doctors had temporarily paralyzed her, because 1 minute she's paralyzed, she's in fear of this and the babies, the next minute she's the baby's life, and the next minute she's in for an emergency surgery. Then the surgery went well, the baby was born, the paralysis was ended, and she recovered from the bad shot, and her focus then was on the baby and not on herself. And she never actually fully dealt with the fact that she had been temporarily paralyzed and all that went into it with the rest of the situation of the emergency C-section. The next day, she came into class, and she looked horrible. Very worn out, exhausted. I went over to her and I said, didn't sleep much? And she said no. She was having bad dreams and emotional reactions and thinking about all the things that had happened and occurred and how no one had paid attention to her. And for the rest of the day, every 5 or 10 minutes, she kept coming up to me. Goes, and you know what else the doctors did? Oh, and by the way, can you believe they did this? And for the rest of the day, she kept asking me, making statements like that. So I pulled her aside at the end of the class and I said, you do realize that this is something that you haven't dealt with and that you've been carrying around with you, whether you've been unconscious or conscious of it, and that it is something you really should deal with. And she's like, I know, I'm going to do that. I fortunately got emails from her a couple of months later, and she was in the best state she'd been in a long time. So, coming back to the fact that people say that we don't store emotions in our tissues and we don't keep things locked up inside, I'm going to have to beg to differ, because just by simply working on a 15-year-old scar, we were able to bring back this woman to a very bad situation and allow her to work through it and realize that this was affecting her for the last 15 years. So this is what I like to call a whole picture moment. A couple of things came together. I wasn't just doing manual work, I was taking time and paying attention to the client and to everything that was going on with her, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Physically, we saw the power of scar tissue. and you working to release it and let go of what's going on with someone, to release the adhesions, not just for the physical problems, but for the other emotional blockages they have that are attached to everything that those physical adhesions were causing. The fact that we took a few minutes to question and give her the opportunity to go through and figure out what was bringing up these emotions, that she went through something bad that she never really dealt with, right? And the fact that by doing that and then doing follow-up support with her, to find that she was able to take that experience and turn it around and clear some very negative stuff out of her life to move forward from something that was a 15-year-old baggage that she was carrying around. That's a whole picture, ladies and gentlemen. We are more than just manual therapists. We need to not just think about body on, body off the table and what techniques I'm going to do. Speaking with the client, taking a few minutes to simply be with the client, listen to the client, maybe guide the client with a couple of questions to realizations or into maybe a better choice that works for them by giving them the information to choose that they might not have had before. Simple knowledge and understanding, caring and support combined with manual therapy. That's what we are. We are whole person therapists. I'm Marjorie Brook for Brook Seminars, Bodywork Education. Thanks for sharing your time with me.